I Saw the TV Glow is one of the best horror movies of 2024, and yet many people were disappointed by it. A lot of folks were hyped for a bit of stylish, nostalgic horror and felt let down with the final result. This movie has been heavily critiqued for being boring, meandering, oddly performed, and it feels like nothing happens. And if I'm being honest, I think these critiques are pretty fair. When you hear about a horror movie where some kid's favorite show begins to blur into reality, that's an exciting premise, and I Saw the TV Glow probably isn't what you were imagining. There's no big monster or killer chasing down our protagonists. The clearest antagonist we get is hardly shown throughout the movie and doesn't actually play a significant role in most of the plot. There are no jump scares or gory kills or high-octane action sequences. There's some uncanny and dark visuals, just look at the Ice Cream Man, but nothing that is going to disturb your average horror junkie in 2025. The movie isn't trying to get you to scream in terror or shock you with outrageous depravity. The director Jane Schonbrun has even talked about how answering whether or not this is a horror movie isn't very straightforward. In my opinion, however, it's definitely a horror movie. And it explores much more complicated and deep-seated fears than spiders or clowns or killers. It explores the fears of inauthenticity, regret, failure, wasted time, isolation, hurting people you care about. These fears are a lot harder to convey on a screen in a successful and meaningful manner, but for me, I Saw the TV Glow does exactly that. I think if this movie didn't resonate with you, that's perfectly okay. It's a peculiar work that will land heavily for some and completely miss the mark for others. Fortunately for me, that tends to be my favorite kind of media. Unsurprisingly, considering just about everything about the movie, this movie has resonated with many who have gone through a gender transition or who otherwise have some degree of gender dysphoria. Schonbrun has spoken about how Owen and Maddie represent two sides of their own transition journey, and while I don't think the film hammers you with these themes, they're not exactly subtle either. I wish I could find it again, but when looking at the response to I Saw the TV Glow, there was one comment that said something like, "I loved the movie, and I feel like it was made exactly for me." Honestly, I don't really understand what cis people are getting out of it when it's so obviously about transitioning. Well, I'm here to provide an explanation, at least my explanation for that. I'm a straight cis guy, and I think this movie captures its themes so well that it actually transcends them in a way. Not only does the movie convey feelings of gender dysphoria in a powerful way, but I think it can be generalized and argued that this movie captures a broadly encompassing existential dysphoria that applies to just about everyone at some time or another. I want to make it clear that I am in no way trying to ignore the trans and queer themes throughout the movie. I'm not trying to ciswash this fantastic movie, all of that is still very much there. I just think that other people are better equipped to talk about it on that front, links in the description. I simply want to examine and explain why and how this movie can be so impactful even if you've never struggled with gender. I'm doing a bit of artistic yes and. And with that in mind, let's get started and discuss the existential dysphoria of I Saw the TV Glow. Part 1. Existential Dysphoria. Meet Owen. He doesn't have many friends, no meaningful romantic attachments, he just likes TV shows. He's close with his mom, which makes it all the more painful when she passes. He isn't very close with his dad. His dad's more of a man's man, and Owen definitely isn't.
Isn't that a show for girls?
His dad is no Jack Torrance, no dangerous psychopath, but there's an uncomfortable tension between them. There's no sense of support, acceptance, or emotional vulnerability in this relationship. The dad would likely see those as kind of sissy and weak. Owen meets Maddie, and they bond over the TV show The Pink Opaque. At first, it may seem like a kid's show,
but it's way too scary, and the mythology is way too complicated for most kids.
Although Owen and Maddie don't talk much, she leaves him tapes of The Pink Opaque, along with occasional notes or drawings. Eventually, they reconnect in person. Maddie tells him that she likes girls and asks if he likes girls or boys.
I think that I like TV shows.
And then, very tellingly, Owen states,
"When I think about that stuff, it feels like someone took a shovel and dug out all of my insides, and I know there's nothing in there."
In this moment, we see the core of Owen's character. There is a deep and resonant discomfort with who he might be, how he might feel, and instead of acknowledging this discomfort, exploring, understanding, and sorting it out, he ignores it. He leaves it undisturbed and unresolved. He would rather keep the uncomfortable but familiar status quo rather than facing the psychological and social consequences of any actions he might take. Contrast this with Maddie, who is true to herself come what may. She loses a close friendship after Maddie told them she liked girls, and knowing that she wouldn't be able to survive the endless dichotomy of inauthenticity versus assholes being judgmental and antagonistic, even plans to run away. At this stage in the narrative, both Maddie and Owen are facing the early stages of what I will call existential dysphoria. Existential dysphoria can broadly be thought of as a feeling of detachment from where your life is. A feeling that the current destination doesn't match the trajectory, that you aren't who you were supposed to be. Both Owen and Maddie are beginning to feel this discomfort and detachment, but only Maddie is able to clearly identify what it is. Owen would prefer to ignore it entirely. Further, Maddie recognizes that this existential dysphoria will only grow more and more severe if she continues along the path she is trapped in within this town. And she isn't willing to accept that. She's even able to see that Owen is facing similar struggles and invites him to run away with her, but although he agrees, he betrays her trust and backs out. Regardless, she follows through. Owen, meanwhile, stays, now more alone than ever. And his existential dysphoria continues to grow unexamined and ignored year after year after year after year. Look, plenty of young adult fiction and coming-of-age stories focus on feeling like you're destined for something greater or something different, yearning for connection and self-discovery. I Saw the TV Glow accepts those general ideas and asks, so what happens if you don't get the storybook ending? What happens if instead of chasing your dreams, becoming who you always thought you could be, making lasting relationships and proving everyone wrong, you instead stayed still? Contentment over fulfillment, safety over sincerity, complacency over meaning. Part 2. Understanding Owen. Years later, when he reconnects with Maddie, Owen is told by his closest friend that this entire world, his thoughts, memories, and everyone around him is artificial and fake. In reality, he is a character from his favorite TV show The Pink Opaque who has been poisoned by Mr. Melancholy and is dying out in a shallow grave. The only way for him to return to his real life in the Pink Opaque is to kill himself in the normal world. When Owen refuses, I think it's reasonable to be disappointed in his decision. We want him to be reunited with his friend. We want him to live the exciting and fulfilling life that we believe he could in the Pink Opaque. But while I understand this view and sympathize with it, I also sympathize with what Owen would feel like. Allow me a brief digression as I wax philosophical and talk about Plato's allegory of the cave. I promise this is relevant. In Plato's allegory, you got a bunch of people living in a cave watching shadows of puppets on a wall, and they think that these shadows are reality. The shadow of a puppet of a cat is a cat. One of them realizes that they have just been watching shadows of puppets and they're actually multiple steps removed from reality. As they escape the cave and witness the truth, they are blinded by the grandeur of the world and the literal light of the sun. After basking in glorious reality seen for the first time, they could return to the cave and try to save the others. But their experience in the light has rendered them unable to decipher the shadows on the wall, their eyes no longer adjusted for the darkness. We can imagine the remaining cave dwellers being reasonably appalled by this. Someone has left the cave, the only reality they've ever known, and now they're rambling on about greater truths they can't possibly show you? Furthermore, upon their return, their capacity to witness what you interpret as reality, i.e. the shadows on the wall, has been severely crippled. They say that you can reach enlightenment as well, that you can experience the really real, but only if you sacrifice everything you know and care about based on their possibly delusional word alone. Is it so crazy to be afraid of such a risk? Knowing that you wouldn't be able to ever return to the cave the same, what if you sacrificed everything, but you were wrong. It's a lot like asking if someone approached you right now and told you that you were in the Matrix, nothing is real, and you can be freed if you off yourself, what would you do? I think most of us would readily decline. Why abandon everything and everyone we know and love just because someone says it's somehow less real, whatever that means? Yet this is very similar to the situation Owen finds himself in. I think this helps explain Owen's perspective on this, and I also think it explains why many people remain complacent even as the existential dysphoria slowly and gradually increases. It's not usually about the huge dramatic decisions, but the more subtle daily choices we make. You could get a new job or move somewhere that you've always wanted, but are you willing to sacrifice the comfortable status quo you've built up for that? What if it doesn't work out and you end up right back where you are, but worse? I'm not saying that this line of thinking is the most rational or optimal or healthy, simply that it is representative of legitimate anxieties and worthy of sincere consideration. As an audience, we want Owen to make the difficult, terrifying, crazy choice and to trust Maddie. But even if we don't agree with his choice, we should at least understand where he's coming from. Decisions like these, even if they seem obvious to those who have escaped the cave and seen the bright, shining, beautiful world outside, aren't so clear-cut to those who haven't had that experience. And so, Owen stays in the cave. He continues living an ordinary, comfortably uncomfortable, and unfulfilling life. A life that, notably, we hardly get to see. Part 3. Something Lost to Time. The story of Rip Van Winkle is an American classic. I know, another digression, but trust me, this is the last one. You have good old Rip who's living his best life in a New York village. One day he gets drunk and passes out just partying too hard. But when Van Winkle wakes up, he realizes this was no ordinary nap. It was a 20-year slumber. And he slept through some important events, like the whole of the Revolutionary War. Now Rip Van Winkle wakes up as an old man in a world that is vastly different than the one he remembers so fondly. It's hardly recognizable. He's been missing from his family, his friends have all died, and society has very literally left him behind. While Owen doesn't fall asleep for 20 years in the movie, he may as well have. They yada yada over his whole life after he declines returning to the Pink Opaque. We're told he has a wife and kids that he loves, but we don't even see them.
I even got a family of my own. I love them more than anything.
He has a job at a children's play place and arcade, but he just seems to be going through the motions. Just like Rip, Owen's life has skipped him over. And just like Rip, when Owen realizes this, when the weight of a lifetime of choices and the lack thereof comes bearing down upon him, the only response he has to it is a panicked scream. I think we've all had similar moments. Moments where we stop ourselves and are amazed at the ever-present passage of time. Has it really been 10 years since I graduated? Have I been working at the same company for that long? And it's in these moments that existential dysphoria is at its strongest. Every uncomfortable thought or feeling that Owen has bottled up, every difficult decision that he shelved for another day, every forgotten moment that contributed imperceptibly to where he is now, comes crashing down on him all at once. The bottle bursts, the shelf cracks, and it's no longer possible to ignore just how critical things have gotten. Owen realizes that he is dying, he can't breathe, his life is coming to an end, and what the hell does he have to show for it? In the movie's climax, Owen is overwhelmed with existential dysphoria, and there is nothing he can do about it anymore. It's too late. Part 4. There is still time. And thus, the movie concludes in the most horrific way possible. It doesn't scare you with monsters or paranormal hijinks. It explores those fears of failure, of isolation, of wasting our whole lives. It takes those deep-rooted fears and it takes them seriously. The movie interrogates us. What if all those fears came to fruition? What if you fail? What if you don't make anything of yourself? What if you lose the connections that are most meaningful to you? What if you become trapped in your own life? And in my opinion, that's what makes I Saw the TV Glow one of the scariest movies I have ever seen. But that's not quite accurate. I said that the movie concludes like this, but it doesn't, not exactly. After his scream of realization, Owen goes to the bathroom to recover, and it is there that he cuts open his flesh. While a more literal reading might indicate self-harm, I think it's more reasonable to suggest this is Owen finally looking inward. Even though it is painful and uncomfortable and disturbing, especially because it's something that he's largely avoided throughout his life, by looking under the surface and seeing what's within, he sees that there is still a bright glow. Sure, his life may not be where he wants it to be right now, and he may not be the person he wants to be right now, but his life isn't over. It's still his decision what to do, how to live, and who to be moving forward. And there is another, even more blatant moment that supports this reading. After Owen denies Maddie's offer, the audience is shown a street plastered with pink chalk drawings. The same street we see in the first shot of the film, and we see the words, "There is still time." Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "Be not the slave of your own past." It is okay to grow and change and evolve. If anyone accuses you of changing your opinion or that you are a hypocrite, you can critique your past self while reveling in today. Preferences change, opinions change, beliefs change, people change. And that's okay. Obviously, we should have the self-awareness to be aware and mindful of such changes, but we shouldn't stifle justified and valuable growth simply out of some idea of loyalty to our past self. The notion of the self is malleable and capable of being redefined as much as we find necessary and worthwhile. As with Emerson, so too with Owen, and so too with each of us. There is still time. That's the message I ultimately come away with after watching I Saw the TV Glow. Yes, it is a horror movie. After all, horror is the genre of destabilization, disorientation, and discomfort. Feelings associated with dysphoria of all kinds. But just because it is horror doesn't mean it is unrelentingly bleak. So if you are out there feeling that sense of existential dysphoria creeping in, I'd recommend that you make the uncomfortable decisions that lead to meaningful results. Deepen your connections with those you care about and be the person you'd like to be. It's easier said than done. We are talking about literally everything in your life, but change is possible. Take it step by step, day by day, and if you need to cope by watching some TV, then that's perfectly all right. There is still time.